think of the word hood, I think of a person, a place, and perhaps even a thing. I'm Sir Creepsta, and welcome to Muhlenberg County Ghost Stories from the Hood. Tonight's tale of terror is entitled House of Ghosts and Demons Part 3, The Hauntings of Little Rick. By now, one can only imagine the amount of blood-curdling fear the family was experiencing had to have had their emotions in total overdrive. Not only were they dealing with a seemingly friendly prankster of a ghost in Mr. Hubert, it had become apparent to everyone that they were also dealing with an entity that was on a whole other level when it comes to having to deal with anything remotely supernatural, strange, and or unknown. Dealing with a common ghost was one thing, but having to tackle with someone seemingly possessed was definitely something that none of the household was prepared for. But before I go any further, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to click on the little bell icon so that you can be in the loop each and every time I drop a new video. With that being said, sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and be terrified by yet another Muhlenberg County ghost story from the Hood. According to the older brother, he and the rest of his family would continue to live in this hell house for at least another 5 or 6 years. During that time, he would eventually graduate high school, move out of the house, and go about starting a life of his own. His younger brother, who by now was a senior in high school himself, was on the verge of doing the exact same thing. Throughout the remaining years they lived in the house, Teresa's situation only worsened over time. The entity that had attached itself to her simply refused to let go, getting so bad at times that at one point it caused their parents to dab with the thought of perhaps putting her away in some sort of mental facility, thus allowing the staff there to care for her. But being the religious parents that they were, they immediately removed that thought from their mind and continued to allow God to give them the guidance they needed and show them the way. Time would pass by, and the boy's parents, along with their sister Teresa, would succumb to illness and old age, and they would eventually go on to meet their makers in their final resting places. The house would remain vacant for several years. Then, on and around the year 2003, a relative of the family would unknowingly move into the hell house, along with his wife and their 3 children. Little Rick, the nickname given to him by his mama, was overjoyed to finally be able to move into a much larger place, a place that he and his family could call home. But immediately upon moving into the house, Little Rick felt an eerie gut feeling that there was something very much so wrong with this house. According to Rick, the move itself went smooth, and everyone seemed to be pleased with the house, especially with its size. It gave the family the extra space that they had always longed for in a home. The house allowed his kids to finally have not only a room, but most importantly, a home to call their own. This pleased both he and his wife very much. Just seeing the look of joy and happiness written all over his kids' faces was enough to make any parent feel as if it was truly a blessing from God. But this feeling of joy and excitement would be short-lived. On their very first night in the house, Rick recalled that there seemed to have been an issue with the electricity due to the fact that the lights just started flickering off and on all by themselves for no apparent reason. He then told me that this instantly reminded him of the bad feeling in his gut that he had felt earlier when he first stepped foot into the house. He also mentioned to me that his kids immediately started complaining about how cold it was in their room, and how their room had a weird ammonia-like smell about it. So he immediately went about checking all the light fixtures, the plumbing, as well as the furnace. And according to Rick, everything checked out just fine, leaving them clueless to what was going on in his house regarding those particular things. According to Rick, after the initial first night, issues regarding himself with his kids' room, the plumbing, and with the lights, weeks went by without any other apparent problems. However, this would all come to a screeching halt around the third month of he and his family occupying the house. It was around this time Rick would tell me that one night he was awakened out of his sleep by the loud screaming out and yelling from his kid's bedroom at around 3 o'clock in the morning. Not knowing what was wrong, he rushed to their bedroom to check up on them. Once inside the room, he went to the eldest of his kids and began asking her what was wrong. Visibly shaken, his daughter would tell him that she was awakened by someone or something whispering in her ear, instructing her and the rest of her family to get out of my house. This prompted her to scream out as loud as she could in utter fear, causing the rest of her siblings to wake up also. When they all were fully awake, the kids said that they all thought that they saw someone standing in the corner of their room, and that it appeared to have been an old man wearing a hat. But when the eldest got up and turned on the lights, the old man was gone, as if he had vanished into thin air. This prompted them to all scream out together in absolute fear. After doing a quick sweep of his kids' room, as well as of the house, Rick would tell his kids that they must have been dreaming or seeing things, and for them to go back to sleep. This was only the beginning for the kids having a run-in with old Mr. Hubert. But the good thing about his kids' run-ins with Mr. Hubert is that they all told him that the old man seemed to always be smiling, and that he never once tried to harm any of them in any way. According to Rick, for the next few months, the kids rarely mentioned Mr. Hubert's name. It was as if he had finally realized that his house was in good hands, and he had finally crossed over into the promised land. Summer and fall had come and gone, and winter had just started to settle in, when, according to Rick, he got up out of his bed to check the furnace because it felt as if it was freezing in the house for some reason. As he went down the dark hallway, Rick would tell me that he thought he saw a large, dark apparition heading his way. But because it was so dark at the time, he said that he could not make out who or what it was at first. But he knew for a fact that it wasn't his wife or any of the kids. The closer the dark figure got to him, Rick said that he was finally able to make out not one figure, but two, and that one appeared to have been very tall, with an extremely elongated neck, whereas the other figure was much shorter, with an abdominous body. He also noticed that the shorter figure had a head that didn't appear to belong to the body in which it was attached to. Nearly about to piss in his pants, Rick told me that he started feeling down the side of the wall, trying to find the light switch. And when he did, he swiftly flicked the lights on, and the demonic figures were gone. By now, Rick told me that he was starting to become more and more afraid of this house. Not one to ever have really believed in anything dealing with the supernatural, Rick was beyond speechless, for he knew what he had just seen wasn't his mind playing tricks on him. It was very much so real. Because of all the things happening to he and his family involved in the house, Rick started to question his faith, asking God why him and his family were being tormented by the unknown supernatural forces and why this particular house seemed to be far from being a happy place, but more like a portal to hell. These were the type of questions that Rick would find himself trying to answer for weeks. But no matter how hard he tried to find out any useful information to help him with the situation, he simply could not. From that moment on, things just went from bad to worse as far as bizarre events that were happening within the house were concerned. There was a time when he found himself in the backyard working on his vehicle, when he would happen to glance up at the window by his kitchen, only to see a very tall, dark-haired woman staring out into the backyard at him from inside his house. At that moment, he rushed into the house, only to once again find no one there. Then there were the many occasions when both he and his wife told me that they would clearly hear someone call out their names, all along fully aware that no one else was at home but the two of them. These frightening events would happen to them at the drop of a dime, and more often than not, without any type of warning. But the one thing that really stood out about all of the bizarre things going on in his house was there was some reason whenever he or his wife would look up at the clock after having been suddenly awakened by loud sounds and bangs or other noises within the house, the two of them always noticed that it was always around 3 a.m. At first, he wasn't clear on what this time of the morning supposedly represented. It would take him discussing his situation with a friend for him to find out that this wasn't a good time of the morning to be dealing with anything supernatural, especially if it was demonic. 3 a.m., according to Little Rick's friend, was the time of the morning when spirits and demons are known to be very proactive. He would go on to tell Rick that it's also referred to as being the witching hour or the devil's hour. Rick recalled that one night he and his wife were sitting at the kitchen table having a social drink, like they often did, when he happened to look up at his wife, only to be terrified momentarily from the sight of her naturally green, but now black eyes. He said that he couldn't help but to call out to her, pointing out the fact that her eyes had desperately turned black. He told me that she just looked at him in a way that sent chills all up and down his spine and asked him in a deep voice, "What the hell are you talking about?" Then, like clockwork, she suddenly snapped back to herself, sporting her naturally green eyes and soft, high-pitched voice. And to top it off, Rick told me that he had went to work the following morning. And the evening, once he returned home, he went to unlock and open his door. As soon as the door opened, Rick told me that his pet dog that he had gotten at the time for his kids ran past him so fast that it parted the leaves that had fallen in his backyard, clearing a perfect pathway for escape. About halfway through the yard, he said that the dog turned around, gave him one last look, and shot off toward the alleyway. Rick says that to this day, he's never seen that dog again. But the horror will be found once Rick went inside the house. For right there at the door were scratch marks all on the back side of the door, indicating that his dog had gotten so afraid of something in his house that he had spent the whole day trying to claw itself out of the house. Rick said this would be the moment in the house he would never forget. Time would pass by, with the events in Rick's house steadily continuing to mount up. Then one night, Rick recalled that his kids came running out of the room in utter fear, claiming that they saw a woman with long black hair in their room standing in the corner. Rick said that he ran to their bedroom, flipped on the light switch, but no one was in the room. At this point, Rick told me that he knew he had to do something to protect himself as well as his family. The following day, he met with the pastor and a retired school teacher and filled them both in on all the things that had been going on in his house and how lately things seemed to have intensified. And according to Rick, the two professional leaders of the community told him that it sounded like his house was under some sort of demonic attack and that he needed to try and take back his home. After verifying that he was in fact a Christian who believed in and served the Lord, the pastor told him he should get a Bible, turn out all the lights in his house, go up to the room with the most activity happening in it, which happened at that time to be the kids' bedroom, and read certain scriptures out of the Bible that he had designated him to read. After finding the particular verses and scriptures in the Bible, Rick said that he spent the entire day going over them and trying to muster up enough courage to go through with it. By nightfall, he had made up his mind that in order to try and save his family from the demons that were torturing them, he knew he had to go with the plan. So he went about turning off all the lights in the house. Then he turned on his flashlight and he slowly walked down the hallway towards the kids' room, who at the time were away at their granny's house. When he finally reached the door, he stopped and took in a deep breath before he proceeded to finish reading the verses of the Bible. But according to Rick, before he was able to complete the whole verse, the kid's door opened and closed so hard that the wind from the back blast pushed him a few feet away from the door. This scared Rick so badly that he told me he turned around and ran through the house, turning on every light in it, and that the lights would remain that way throughout the rest of the night. The next day, Rick told me that he had contacted the two individuals that had told him to go ahead reading the verses in order to cast out the demons. Once he located them, Rick would tell me that after discussing with them what had happened to him the night before, they both jumped down his throat for doing it, saying to him that he was dealing with something that was way out of his hands to try to tackle alone. Rick told me that this confused and angered him because it was the two of them which had told him to try and rid the demons in the first place. And now all they wanted to do was to criticize him for attempting to do just that. At this point, Rick told me that he had no other choice but to try and deal with the whole situation by himself head on. Rick would tell me that he had a relative that lived out of town that was aware of the situation they was in, and that the relative sent him several blessed crosses and instructed him to place them all over the house in each room, especially in the rooms that tended to be the most active when it came to the demonic events that have been occurring. After doing this, Rick told me that things started to die down around the house. His kids began to spend more and more time in their room playing amongst one another, and neither he or his wife saw any of the strange entities that they had both seen in the past. For once, they all started to act more like a family. Things would be this way for a few months. It wasn't until Rick told me that he had done some repairs to the floor in his kid's room, and afterwards he began to see shadow figures lurking in his backyard as well as in the hallways around 3 a.m. that all hell would break out once again, showing its ugly face to the entire family and setting up one last epic battle between Rick and the demons occupying his home. I'm Sir Creepsta, and until next time, stay terrified.